A fifth of the world's oil moves through a channel narrow enough to see across. This week, Iran was handed a deal to keep it open and said no. Then the strait went quiet. Not calmer, quiet. The kind of quiet that cost the planet money by the hour. Because a choke point this small doesn't need to be closed to break the world. It just needs to be scary. And right now it's terrifying. By the end of this, you'll see why Iran turning down a peace offer wasn't a mistake. It was the whole plan. So let's back up, because the deal it rejected tells you exactly what this war is really being fought over. Start with the water itself. The Strait of Hormuz, at its narrowest, is about 21 miles across. The actual shipping lanes, just 2 miles wide in each direction, with a thin buffer between them. Through that needle passes roughly 20 million barrels of oil every single day, somewhere between a fifth and a quarter of all the oil that travels by sea. There is no backup, no second door. Almost every other route out of the Gulf still ends up feeding through this one gap. Hold that number, 20 million barrels, because everything else hangs off it. Now look at what just happened to the traffic. Between the 24th and the 26th of July, only 29 ships made verified crossings. 29 in 3 days. In a strait that on a normal morning clears that many before breakfast. The oil isn't gone. The tankers exist. They're simply refusing to sail. And that's the first thing to understand about this weapon. Iran hasn't sunk a fleet. It's sunk confidence. Fear is doing the work that torpedoes used to. How did the fear get there? Follow the trail of ships. In early July, 3 vessels were attacked in and around the strait over 2 days. Then Iran hit a Qatari liquefied natural gas tanker, the Al Rikayat, as it transited near Hormuz. Picture that for a second. Not a warship, a gas carrier, the kind of slow, enormous, unarmed vessel the entire global economy quietly depends on. Suddenly, a target in a 2-mile lane it cannot leave. Every captain in the world heard about that one. And Iran's Revolutionary Guard now says it has struck and stopped 3 oil tankers in the waterway. Struck and stopped. Read that again. That's not a threat about the future. That's a claim about ships already halted. Watch what that did to the price of everything. When the Al Rikayat was hit, Brent crude, the global benchmark, jumped 3% to settle around $74. When U.S. forces struck Iranian targets, it pushed toward 85. And on the 23rd of July, after tankers were reportedly struck off Saudi Arabia, Brent crossed $100 a barrel. 100. Now here's why that number reaches every corner of the world at once. Oil at $100 isn't a headline about tankers. It's the price of the bus, the delivery truck, the plastic, the fertilizer, the food that fertilizer grows. One narrow strait twitches, and a farmer 3 continents away pays more for diesel. That's the reach of 2 miles of water. And here's the mechanism that makes a choke point so brutally efficient as a weapon. A tanker doesn't sail if it can't get insured, and the moment shells start landing near the lanes, war risk insurance premiums explode, sometimes to many times the normal rate overnight. At a certain point, the insurance costs more than the voyage earns, and the ship simply stays in port. No shot has to hit it. The math kills the trip. That's how 29 crossings happens without a single tanker being sunk that week. Iran isn't blocking the strait with steel, it's blocking it with risk. Think about how cheap that is for them and how expensive for everyone else. So the United States tried to answer force with force. It threw a naval blockade around Iran's ports. And President Trump issued a blunt warning that America would destroy an Iranian bridge or a power plant every time Tehran attacked a ship. Strike a tanker, lose a power grid. That was the deal on the table from Washington. Pain for pain. And it did not calm the water for 1 single day. Which tells you something important. You cannot bomb a choke point back open. The more you escalate around it, the more insurers panic, and the fewer ships sail. Force makes the strait quieter, not busier. Remember that. It's the trap the whole war keeps falling into. And if all of this feels strangely familiar, that's because the world has stood exactly here before. Rewind to the 1980s. During the Iran-Iraq War, the Gulf saw its first great tanker war, both sides attacking merchant ships until the numbers became staggering. Iraq struck more than 280 vessels. Iran hit over 160. And Iran did something it is echoing right now. It laid mines and went after the tankers everyone assumed were untouchable. The response back then rhymes with today, too. In July 1987, the United States launched Operation Earnest Will, the largest naval convoy operation since the Second World War, to escort Kuwaiti oil tankers that had been reflagged as American ships. Think about that phrase, reflagged as American. The tankers physically raised the U.S. flag so that attacking them meant attacking Washington directly. And it still wasn't safe. On the very first convoy, the supertanker Bridgeton struck a mine while under U.S. Navy escort. A reminder that in these 2 narrow miles, even the world's most powerful navy can only reduce the danger, never erase it. Escorts, warships, reflagging. None of it made the strait truly open. It just made it survivable. So how did that war actually end? not with a decisive naval victory. It ground on through mines and missiles and a string of tragedies at sea until both sides were simply exhausted, and Iran finally accepted a UN ceasefire. Hold on to that lesson, because it's the most useful thing in this whole story. The last time the Gulf choked like this, force didn't reopen the water. Fatigue did. The fighting stopped when the pain outran the point of it, not a day before. That's the exit this war is circling, whether anyone admits it or not. Which is why, quietly, the real fight moved from the sea to a negotiating table in Oman. And this is the part the headlines rushed past. Oman, the region's patient middleman, brought Iran a genuine off-ramp, a Gulf-backed plan. Keep the strait open and run it on a system of voluntary fees, modeled on the Strait of Malacca, where Southeast Asian nations cooperatively manage one of the world's other great choke points without anyone owning it outright. Ships pay a little, everyone shares the water, the oil keeps moving. On paper, it's the sensible ending. Face saving for Iran, safety for everyone else, money for the coastal states, a clean way out. Iran said no, twice, in fact. Back on the 11th of July, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi rejected an earlier version, a plan for two separately controlled corridors, and insisted instead on a single joint framework. Then this week, Deputy Foreign Minister Kazem Garibabadi turned down the voluntary fee plan outright and went further. He warned the strait would stay closed unless it's done Iran's way. And Tehran added a line that should stop you cold, that the strait will not return to its pre-war state, not until the war ends, not until sanctions lift, not going back, ever. Now think about what that reveals. If Iran simply wanted the war to pause, it would have taken the deal. Open water, saved face, quieter front. It refused, which means the goal was never just to survive the war. Listen to what Iran is actually demanding. Control over both lanes of the strait. Not shared management, not a fee everyone agrees to. Control. And that reframes this entire crisis. Iran isn't trying to close the Strait of Hormuz. It's trying to own it. That's the whole game. A country under blockade, its missiles being intercepted, its allies being struck. What does it have left? One thing. The tap. The single valve that a fifth of the world's oil flows through. And the one asset you never surrender in a negotiation is the only card that still frightens the other side. So Iran isn't clutching the strait out of stubbornness. It's clutching it because the moment it lets go, it has nothing left to trade. The choke point isn't a battlefield to Tehran. It's the last bargaining chip on earth, and it will not spend it cheap. And look closely at what Iran countered with, because it gives the game away. Oman's plan was a shared, voluntary fee. Nobody owns the water. Everyone chips in, like the deal that keeps the Strait of Malacca calm on the other side of the world. Iran's answer was the opposite. Control of both lanes, on its own terms, permanently. Strip away the diplomatic language, and that's a demand for a toll booth. A toll booth on a fifth of the planet's oil. Whoever sets the terms of passage through Hormuz doesn't just collect fees. They hold a switch wired directly into the global economy, one they can flip during the next crisis, the next sanctions fight, the next decade. That is worth more to Tehran than any single battle because it outlasts the war. A weapon you can only fire once is a threat. A toll booth is income and leverage forever. Iran isn't fighting for a ceasefire, it's fighting for the switch. And once you see it that way, the refusal this week stops looking reckless and starts looking patient, which is why every solution so far has quietly made things worse. The US blockade? It squeezed Iran harder, so Iran gripped the strait tighter. The Oman fee plan? It asked Iran to give up its only leverage for a handshake, so Iran walked. Each move aimed at reopening the water gives Iran one more reason to keep it shut. That's the loop nobody on the outside can seem to break. The harder the world pushes to free the strait, the more precious the strait becomes to the one hand holding it closed. And here's the uncomfortable scale of it. This isn't a standoff between two navies. It's a standoff between one country's survival and the entire world's fuel bill. On one side, a nation that believes letting go means defeat. On the other, a planet that needs those 2 miles of water to stay calm or everyone pays. Those two things cannot both win, not on the current terms. Now, the honest part, because this isn't a prophecy and drama shouldn't pretend to be certainty, choke points have frozen before and thawed. The Malacca model exists precisely because rivals once found a way to share water they couldn't afford to fight over. A deal that gave Iran real standing, real fees, real face, a seat at the table instead of a boot on its neck, could still drain this faster than any warship. The door Oman opened is not slammed shut. It's just being ignored while both sides test how much pain the other can take. But strip away the hope and look at the direction. 20 million barrels a day threading a 2-mile lane. 29 ships in 3 days. Oil past $100. A blockade that didn't work, a threat that didn't land. And a peace plan Iran threw back on the table, not because it couldn't accept, but because accepting means surrendering the only thing it has left. The world keeps asking when Iran will reopen the Strait of Hormuz. That's the wrong question. Iran already told us the answer this week, not on anyone's terms, but its own. The strait isn't closed by accident. It's closed on purpose and held as ransom. If this is the leverage Iran refuses to spend, there's one more piece that changes the whole board. The country that just flew its own jets into this fight, and why that may finally force Iran's hand. That's the next one.